start again. It's a
Hey y'all, welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited about this episode because this is something that I feel like people say that about every episode, but truly this is something that literally I would say guides and leads our life a lot. Like we're always constantly thinking about our lineage. We're constantly thinking about setting things up for our kids, like, and especially spiritually.
Yeah.
And so I just want us to jump right in. Like, there's no intro, no nothing. Let's get it. We have been talking about this. It's nighttime. That's the only time we can find the film. And I always say that because y'all know I'm not a night person. But I really, really want to talk about this today. And I want to start by saying there's several different ways you can take this. Me and Maya were just talking about this before the camera came on. There's always this theological debate on whether or not Christians can be under a curse, whether or not Christians can be demon possessed. We aren't going to focus on that aspect of it. It's not going to be a theological debate on that. What we are going to say is we can all agree that we see sin cycles from generation to generation to generation. And what I mean by sin cycle is you can look at a family and point out, oop.
Yep.
And so that is what we're focused on today because we can't, that ain't even worth the debate. We all see that, right?
Yeah.
And so we also really want this to be really practical, and we're going to be vulnerable and tell y'all how we are breaking generational curses up for our family and just kind of give some tips because I think we separate our lives so much from the Word of God and from what He's asking us to do when He wants it all. He wants to be in the midst of it. And so let's jump into it. So I think the number one thing is like identifying the generational curses. And so like, how would you say that we identify generational curses, or how do you do that? Like if you look back first, what are you looking for? What does that look like?
Things that I see that often happen from generation to generation, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's abuse, whether it's various different things. I mean,
I'm not trying to be funny, but a good way, if you're wondering like, dang, do I have any generational curses over my life or in my family? And I would say yes, because of the fall, we all do. But the best thing to do is go to a family reunion. Right?
Low key, yeah.
Go to a family reunion. And it's not, and everybody's so like, I don't want to judge, but here's why I feel like that's a tactic of the enemy. I don't want to be judgy. Are you more concerned with being judgy than you are in living in freedom? You know what I'm saying? Like no, and that's not even biblical. Like believers are supposed to judge one another. Like that's another podcast. But yeah, so looking at what is and generational, and I want to list some generational curses. It could be anything, but just because I don't want to ever assume that we're like a bunch of just hardcore believers or advanced Christians, because some people might just be, this may be the first time you sit down. Because also I be watching like Instagram shorts and stuff, and they'll be like, oh, we're getting ice cream, point of view, breaking generational curses, like my baby deserves luxury. What are you talking about? Like, I really wish people would stop playing with spiritual things and making shorts out of them, because like this is not a joke. Generational curse has nothing to do with ice cream. It's so much deeper than that. And so that is why I'm like, let's go into this. It is literally the reason that families and generations are dying. Like that is how deep it is, and we're comparing it to ice cream.
Yes.
What? Anyways, so teen pregnancy could be, or forget teen pregnancy, being married out of wedlock.
True.
That's a generational curse. Like you
babies out of wedlock, not being
having babies out of wedlock is a generational curse. Sure. If divorce, if you can, and that's the thing is like you become so numb to it, because a generational curse is pretty much something that it's a sin that you're exposed to, and you're more likely to like fall into that sin because you've been exposed to it over and over again. It almost becomes normal to your environment.
But it's like a sin that's a part of like your family's identity.
It's not truly a part of, it shouldn't be a part of your identity. But your family has
attached
to their identity. Yeah, and sometimes the society can make it a positive thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a flex or like a, and so you gotta put your spiritual eyes on to see it. Like divorce, or you just see it's like, we just got a bunch of strong women, we don't take no mess, but everybody and their mama divorced in the family. Yeah. That's a generational curse. Yeah. That does not have to be you. And I think that's the biggest thing too that I want people to get out of this video. You don't have to accept that generational curse. Another one, poverty.
Shoot, the mindset too. Yeah.
It's a mindset. And so poverty for me is one that I was like, hold up. It stops with me. Yeah. And so you may not be responsible. And that's one thing you're going to hear us say over and over again. You may not be responsible for the generational curse, but it can stop with you.
Yes.
And it should. And I think for me, like Christians, like sometimes we see poverty as like holy. And so it's for, it was something like I didn't necessarily recognize as like demonic. It is demonic. Mm-hmm. It is very demonic. And the Bible gives me the principles. That's another way to identify if it's a generational curse. Does the Bible give you principles to make that thing look better and do what it's supposed to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the Bible tells me too much about money for me to not think that my family lacking money is not a generational curse.
It was true. A lot of people in the Bible, they had a whole lot of this, whole lot of that, whole lot of this, whole lot of that.
What you mean?
So like, I'm just saying, like David, Solomon, Abraham, they had money.
They were wealthy. Yes, they were wealthy.
So,
and that's not what this podcast is about, because I know that can distract people. But yes, so why not me? Right? If there was a generational blessing in the Bible that I can claim, why not me? And so, let's see, divorce, alcoholism, what else? Help me, babe, because I want people, help people out. And
drug abuse,
sex abuse, pornography, any sin, really, lying, gossip, anything. Like maybe people just tear people down with their mouth in your family.
Gluttony.
Oh, yes. Like, and so many times we'll say like, well, this is just my genes. It runs in my family. It's like, there are habits.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing I was thinking through, like habits versus generational curses. They just generational habits, but that turns into, and it's kind of the same. It's like the fact that everybody is obese. Okay, let's look and see what habits did that generational curse manifest into my life, or what habits do I have that manifested that generational curse into my life? I think that's one way to look at it. And obesity is one of those that we just kind of. I saw this meme and said, I'm gonna get it wrong. It was like, why can believers pray down heaven, speak it into existence, everything except for their weight? And I was like, oh no. I felt convicted. So, it's just like looking at, and I think another thing too, in order to point them out, you have to almost be in a different environment.
True.
And so like thinking about the obesity thing, not even trying to be funny, but like, when I used to eat with my like thinner friends, and it's not about my weight, like obviously I know I'm not, whatever, you know what I mean? But they ate different. Their diet was different.
Yes.
And that's the same thing with everything. Like when you look at marriages and you look at, I always say like, Maya and I have marriage privilege. We both come from married homes. That's true. That is a privilege. And so when things get hard, divorce is really not even like, on the table. It's like, okay, we got 99 options.
Like, that's not an option.
And divorce ain't one of them. And so that's generational blessing, right?
True.
And even though I think it's just one generation, at least for me, it's one generation, or is that two? I can't count today. It's still, you know what I mean? It makes a huge difference. Yeah. And I think I just wanted to name a few because you could be so close to it that you can't see it.
Yeah, true.
Or it's become so much of a norm that you can't see it.
True.
Even generational curses of being controlled by money or depression or, I'm not talking about stuff where you need medicine stuff, but just these little things that we just, anxiety, like stuff we just, anger is another one where it's like, well, it just happened, or, okay, but granddaddy was angry, your great-great-granddaddy was angry, your great-great-great-great-granddaddy was angry. Yeah. It's like, okay, if every granddaddy was angry, that could possibly be the generational curse. And so you're not judging these people. I'm looking at where we were so that I can get where we going. And that can be hard. Yeah. I think another, just looking at where are the tensions at in the family. Like that's another way to help identify, like, you get what I'm saying? Like, where are there fights over? What is everybody always fighting over? Or what, whenever you stand up for something, causes pushback? Yeah,
that's a big one.
Y'all know what I mean? Like, so I'm trying to give an example.
So if you come from a family of alcoholism, and alcohol's at every major function, but you decide, you know what? I'm gonna stop drinking.
Yeah, you're not bringing it to my, or you
Or you're
decide
not bringing it to my
you
house.
can't bring it to my house.
So if you say, "Hey, no, y'all not bringing it to the house," that instantly creates a conflict,
and people are pissed.
and people are mad.
The audacity at my house, and
Yeah,
that's
people-
how it is. And we're gonna
Yeah.
get into that later. But when you make
Yeah.
a stance, it's like people be mad at you. It's like, dude, you ain't gotta come to my house,
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to do. I just say,
right?
hey,
Or even when you go to a function, people are tripping. Remember, we got to go with one of our friends. We were in Atlanta. He took us to the house. Everybody was tripped out of the fact that he didn't drink anymore. He's like, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna be truly
Yeah.
saved. And so I think that's the first thing. It truly is identifying and be wild with it. Point it out. Look at yourself. So for me, if I see that there's a sin pattern that I'm falling into, I'm like, hold up. And then if I pray, the Holy Spirit will say, "Doot, doot, 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 doot," and I will see the patterns and I will begin to deal with that thing because I know I don't have to live like that.
True.
You know what I mean?
True. But you realize that sin habit wasn't like your only option, your only way of life. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
I refuse to live lower than what I have to. And that kind of leads me to number 2, equip yourself spiritually and educate yourself.
Yes.
Because I think once you identify the sin habit, in order to be able to deal with it, you got to understand this book, like the Bible. You got to understand it. You have to understand your birthrights as a believer, right? As a born again believer. And another thing too, though, with educating yourself is like, once I identify it, and we identify each other. So if you're married, you need to know each other's, because I would just straight up tell Meyer, what we not gonna do is X, Y, Z, because you struggle with that, they struggle with that, and the other person struggle with that. I see a pattern. That's what we not gonna do. And we're just honest with each other.
Yeah. But that relationship piece is important though.
It is.
Like,
And
if we didn't develop our relationship, then we wouldn't be able to lean on each other.
yeah.
Trust what the other is saying.
Yeah.
So
Equipping yourself spiritually. There's an example in the Bible that I think is so powerful. The David and Solomon example.
yes. So when David pretty much passed the torch to Solomon, when he was pretty much saying like, "Hey, here are the keys to the kingdom," and some of his instructions were to, "Hey, these are my enemies. So before you really get your throne established, you need to handle business. You need to make sure that you get rid of them, get rid of any enemies that we have before you truly establish your kingdom." And also, even before that, he talked about, hey, make sure you stand firm in the Lord, you stand firm in God, and live by his statutes and commandments. And that was big. So it's like, not only do I have to get rid of anything that isn't for me, but I also have to live according to the principles of God to stay away from those bad things.
Yeah, because I think too, if you say you take his enemies and you make that your enemy is this generational curse, okay? Bottom line. And Solomon could not establish his kingdom until he took out all of the enemies, right? And so that's the same thing with us. We cannot establish our kingdom. We cannot, and we're all about kingdom living. We cannot live in our kingdom assignment without, you can, but the freedom that we desire, the kingdom living that we trying to do, I forgot to tell y'all, there is a special announcement at the end of this video, and I'm super excited about it. I'm sorry. That's how my brain works. There's a special announcement, but the stuff that we want to do, we can't live in the bondage of our generational curses. And so I think, and people, when it comes to the debate of whether generational curses or sin cycles even exist, you look at David, right? Yes. The example where David, y'all know, he went, handled his business with Bathsheba that he shouldn't have been doing. Yep. And then you look again, what was Solomon's downfall?
Women.
Okay, so ladies, this is for you. If you look at your husband and you see this man in the family struggle with women, this man in the family struggle with women, this man in the family struggle with women, you and your husband need to sit down and establish some guidelines. Like, there's just certain things we don't do. Because even I'm like, I know you love the Lord, but he's not Jesus. And so there's just certain things. It's like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. And it gives you a prayer strategy too.
True.
And so that's a prime example. David and his son, and Solomon was wise.
Solomon was the wisest man ever.
So it's not a brain thing.
Yes. It's not.
Which is why I'm like, equip yourself spiritually. I think this is, if you don't take anything else from this whole thing, The Bible says we do not fight against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. How do you fight a spiritual battle? You fight it on your knees. And I think even when we first got married, there was all this stuff we were going through, fighting all these generational curses, norms, and things that other people think are normal. And you stand up and you decide it's not normal for us. That might be normal for you, but as for our household, this is what we gonna do. I spent a lot of time crying and worrying when I should have been, and I prayed. That's the only way I made it through that. But I should have been praying. I should have been walking around, fasting, casting out demons, to be honest, and sending them to where they belong, and really like fighting a spiritual. My mind could have been in a whole different place.
That's true.
Like I should have been in spiritual battle mindset. You get what I'm saying?
That's true.
And so, if I could encourage anybody, like when you're going through and you're looking at these generational curses and stuff like that, I would encourage you, like, get in your word, get around other believers who believes this thing is real, because unfortunately there are other Christians who don't think this is real, which I think is so fascinating that you think that this is not real, that there are Christians that think this isn't real, but get with them that are like, hey, we know this is real, but we're going to live above and beyond, because also what we believe is real is that Jesus died and that we have the power to overcome it.
Yep.
We got 4 steps, by the way. I didn't tell y'all that. But number 3 is to remove yourself and set yourself apart.
Yes.
I think this is the hardest one to do.
Yes, because it's counterculture.
Yeah.
And it takes a boldness. It takes a humility, first of all, but it takes a boldness to go against the grain. And sometimes you're going to catch heat, like we said before. Sometimes you're going to catch slack. But if you truly desire the freedom or desire the relationship that you desire to be with God, then that's the requirement. It
is required. And it's beautiful on the other side of it. Once you go through the hell, it's beautiful on the other side of it. And I think for me too, like, okay, I have a very, very good example of this. Just being vulnerable, transparent, even with my parents. We don't talk to a lot of the family on one side of my family. And I remember like being a senior, everybody's inviting their family over to, graduation, and I remember getting so upset with my parents for not inviting them. And now looking back, I'm like, I realized that was part of the generational curse breaking. And it's hard. I don't want to make this video, especially for like the young girl or the young boy, that you are the first generation believer. This stuff is hard. That's why the ice cream thing pisses me off. Yeah. Because you're talking about breaking generational curses, giving your kids ice creams. You have somebody who's in their apartment alone because they made a decision to follow Jesus, and everybody thinks they're weird, or everybody in their family thinks they're too uptight.
Thinks they're crazy.
Thinks they're doing the most. And all these times you've probably heard when you're dealing with, because those demons flare up. When you call out, we will not be doing that, those demons, they flare up. They make you think you're stupid. They make you think you're brainwashed. They make you think you're weak, or you're whipped, or you're whatever else you want to add to that. But it can be lonely. And so I remember being upset with them. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, like, that is a part of the reason I get to walk in so much freedom. Like, if anybody from that side of the family try to come knock on my door and giving me all this hogwash, don't none of that matter to me now.
Not at all.
You can't tell me nothing. You could tell me my parents were the most evil people in the world and give me everything they did wrong. I don't care. Because the freedom that I've experienced on the other side is so worth it. Yeah. And I think I want to encourage the person who is the first generation believer, sold out for Christ, or first generation non-alcoholic, first generation you're not cheating on your wife, first generation whatever it is. Know that if you stand your ground, it's hard right now, but the fruit on the other side is so worth it.
So much sweeter.
It's so much sweeter, and your kids are not going to have to walk through that battle. Yeah. But I want to recognize the fact that it could be lonely.
Yeah.
And it can be hard.
It can be lonely.
But I think that's the importance too of community.
Yes.
Finding a like-minded group of believers in a church that you can belong to, because when you are battling generational curses, the only way you're going to stay from it is being in different environments where you're like, this is what a healthy family looks like? Shut up, you know?
I mean, how many wars you know of, or battles that you went, that you know of, that people went to battle by themselves?
I mean, yeah, that's not a war.
It's not a war.
It's a fist fight.
How well is that gonna go?
Right.
If you don't have a community around you.
Yeah, you got to have a community. And I think what helps too, number 4 is the last one, and then we get to give y'all our special announcement. We got to believe the Easter story. And I love that this is coming out close to Easter, because one of the things I really struggle with, I kind of grieve during the Easter holidays that and I know if you believers aren't, some believers don't celebrate like these man-made holidays. I get that. I respect that. But when we celebrate the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, it's like we dress up for it, we get excited, we spend all this money on this Easter production. I'm like, most Christians have no idea what it means to walk in the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. Because when we talk about generational curses, then we got to talk about the power that we have when Jesus is raised from the dead. Like those two go together, right? That's why I know that I'm not in bondage. Like I'm not a slave to whatever it is that my mama, my grandmama, my great grandmama struggle with, my cousin, that ain't got to be my life.
Yes.
And not only does it have to be my life, if I have the same power that raised Jesus from the dead, it doesn't have to be my life, but also I get to walk in the freedom, I get to walk in the abundance on the other side. And so it's like thinking deeper of like, I don't have to have it like, okay, so here's the thing, like when you have a bad habit, you're supposed to replace it with a good habit. Mm-hmm. And so you got a generational curse, you can replace it with a generational blessing.
Yes.
And so like, what's an example of that?
Shoot, going from poverty to generational wealth.
Generational wealth.
You go from family alcoholics to you're helping people get off of alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Come on, baby.
Like a faith inheritance. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like a spiritual inheritance. Like you see these families. I used to always admire like these families that are like 5th generational Christians or 6th generational Christians or 5th generational ministry and all of these things. And it's like, I didn't realize that like even, okay, so 2 Timothy 1 and 5, this is Paul. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. I am sure dwells in you as well. That's like 3 generations of faith. You can replace a generational curse with a generational blessing. Like I want my kids to have the blessing of knowing like, no. I gave my life to Christ when I was young. Not only that, I know how to speak over my life and not death, right? The Bible says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. And so we've let the world take manifestation from us, speak it and claim it, all of that stuff. And it's like, no. Yeah. That resurrection power, what does that look like to break generational curses? And on a practical too is like, we watch everything that comes into our house and it's exhausting.
It is.
Breaking generational curses. Every decision that we make is through the lens of generational blessings for our family.
That's true.
Would you say that?
Yeah, I agree. And the sacrifice of it's tough, but just knowing the fruit, how sweet the fruit would be, and how much peace and freedom.
Yeah, we have a lot more peace than I think
family can have. Just it gives you hope. It gives you hope, and it gives you like a fight and a push to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, and after years of fighting certain things, and when you see it fall off of your family and and that's another thing, you got to be in prayer and you got to really trust and believe and ask the Holy Spirit to minister to you, because it could fall off, but it don't look like it fell off. Does that make sense? Mm. Like it could already be loosened and the Holy Spirit is like, I shifted this thing. But you don't see it with your physical eyes. Yeah. You got to believe with your spiritual eyes. So even just taking generational wealth, we know we're going to have generational wealth for our family. The struggle is still real right now. We have not yet walked into that fully, but I believe without a shadow of a doubt that is happening.
I have no doubt.
I have zero doubt in my mind and my heart that the girls in the conversations are going to be around our table when they're grown with their spouses and Kai too. We're going to be talking about investments. Yes. We're going to talk about how do we multiply this? Okay, we got this, we got this, we got this. How do we multiply? Okay, what family company are you working for? What are you running? What's the project you got going? I see it.
I see it.
And I believe it.
I see it. And I see the people that we can help with that generational wealth.
Yeah, 100%.
I see it.
But only reason we have the freedom to walk in that. That's another thing why I think when you see the generational curse, say on your mom or your dad or whatever, you don't get mad at them. You get mad at the demon that they were not successfully able to defeat.
Yeah.
Right? There's another scripture. I know we're going on forever here. Proverbs, 3:33. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. And so people don't want to talk about households being cursed, right? But if you got people and you're living with them and they're doing evil things, there could be a curse over the house.
Yeah.
And you could be dealing with that. But you want people to be like, oh yeah, there's a blessing on the house. If there's a blessing on the house, it could be a curse on the house too.
It very much can be.
And so just recognizing, like, even when you see these generational curses, you see your parents carrying them or your siblings carrying them, just know that it's the demon, it's not them. Do not get mad at them. And I think that's why some of these, like, shorts that I see on social media, they're like, generational curses, like, like people are angry at their parents. I'm like, you have no idea what curses they broke.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, the reason why I can see us sitting at the table trading poverty for wealth is because of the spiritual generational curses that my parents broke, so we don't have to fight that battle.
Exactly.
You know?
And those people you laughing at are like, dang, mama, daddy, why'd y'all give me this? Like, you don't know what they inherited. Like, literally, they could have inherited a bigger demon than you inherited. Mm-hmm. Like, the one that they slain is smaller than the one that their parents had.
Smaller or
it got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, and I like to tell black people, like, we're not that far removed from slavery.
Not at all.
And so somebody breaking the generational curse of anger,
that's real.
That's huge. Like, you may not be the one that's breaking the generational curse of poverty, but maybe you don't beat your kids out of anger anymore.
Yeah.
That's huge. When you talk about a people group that have been beat and like, we cannot minimize the fact that we're not that far removed from slavery, and that in itself brought on so much. And so, anyways, that's all to say that I am grateful for that. And we do need to be grateful for the generational curses that our parents broke off. But then we do need it's our duty to allow our kids to be able to have a different conversation
for sure.
And, put on different generational blessings. Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. What's the announcement?
Oh, shoot. We're doing a family channel.
Yes, we're starting a family and farm channel. I thought this was the perfect video to put this announcement in because it just ties in with it. Like, there's so much, like, this land wanting to learn about our food and how we grow our food and provide housing and things like that, that's where our mind is. That's part of the generational blessings that we're trying to set in motion for our children. So our first video will be out Saturday, and so I will link below. Myra will be filming with me and doing all that, because here's the deal. I'll tell you why we decided to do 2 different channels. Because some of y'all are here from when we built our own house, and you miss that content. And truth be told, I miss making that content. I think we'll see. We're going to do this for a year and we'll see how we feel about it. Because I also am very conscious of making sure that our family lives authentically. And, like, I'm not about to be doing stuff for YouTube. You know what I mean?
I definitely ain't supposed to be doing
No. So, like, we will carry our camera with us. But on the flip side of that, I'm not about to be doing stuff for YouTube. But what I do recognize is we can talk about these things in theory, but people just need to see a family. Like, living sold out for the Lord, just being good stewards of what they're doing.
Doing life together.
And just the implementation of what we're talking about. But also, I felt this deep conviction that it's not time to get rid of my personal channel, where God is asking me to go deeper and having these conversations. So I am moving us to 2 channels, and so we'll be over there. I'll put the link if you're like, oh, I wish you would stop talking so much and show us the chickens. The chickens will be over there on the family channel.
Yes.
And so I would love it if you guys go over there, subscribe, and follow us over there. That would be great. So that's the announcement. Anything else?
I'm just kidding. Nah, we good.
We love y'all. See you in the next video.